Well, what do you think? Are you guys ready? Do you want to
I say
just
we
dive
do
into it?
this. Yeah,
All
what
right.
episode are we on, John?
Well, Ryan, I'm glad that you asked. I think I actually have it right this time. This is actually episode 35 of the Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. And as always, this podcast is brought to you by Flatirons Tuning. So head over to Flatirons Tuning. That is the best way to support the podcast, help make sure that we can keep coming back and making this content for you. And today, as we're recording this, the Pikes Peak Hill Climb has just happened, a couple days ago. And we have with us our driver, Scott Crouch, and Scotty from the shop, who's out at the back of the shop, and Ryan from DSX Motorsports. And just since it's all fresh in our minds, definitely wanted to kind of talk through, race week and the race of Pikes Peak, because it was a good race week. And then, man, on race day, there were some interesting things that happened. It kind of showed, why Pikes Peak is such a unique environment and a unique race. The mountain kind of decided to flex its muscles a little bit this year.
Well, that is the overall slogan for Pikes Peak, or one of them anyway, is the mountain decides, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
So let's start at the beginning of race week, or maybe, well, yeah, we kind of talked through practice, but Scott, I mean, since you weren't with us for that conversation, were there any key points or standouts to you from those 3 days of practice leading into race week, just as far as maybe what set the tone for your expectations for race week?
Well, all week in practice, we were making improvements on our times over the prior years, and that was exciting. The car was flawless, thanks to Scotty and all you guys. Didn't overheat, ran great. We had a little crunchy first gear and second gear, but other than that,
right,
car was pull it off the trailer, start it, and go.
Yeah.
I think I made big strides in the middle section in the W's up to 16 miles, and the biggest change there was, rather than first gear and some of those hairpins, I was pulling out in second gear and kind of rolling in quick and trying to come out fast. And I think that made some improvements for us.
Was some, or what part of the difference of that was the fact that now the tune on the car was a bit different, and we had a lot more torque than you had previously had before? But did that play a part?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you or Scotty want to kind of talk through some of the improvements that you saw in that middle sector, which is, and for the people at home, so the middle sector, it starts at Glen Cove,
right,
and it ends at Devil's Playground. So this is
below Devil's Playground, correct?
Yeah. So this is the tight section where, like, if you see the pictures where it looks like the road is just looping back on itself, and just with all the cliffs and stuff, and it's very technical. That's what we're talking about here.
Exactly.
And a ton of hairpins in there. And I think that was one of the biggest things is Scott just carrying way more speed through all those hairpins in second gear, and just that extra torque and just getting him out of it. He was telling me, oh, it's going to bog down. We'll just carry just a little bit more speed, and that torque will get it. And yeah, I mean, we were dropping seconds every single session up there.
Yeah, in the middle sector especially. I think in all of the practice in race week, that was the sector where you picked up the most time from previous years. Is that right?
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm using your guys' cheat sheet from your guys' your message about it, that email you guys put out a little while ago.
Yep.
So, I mean, I'm seeing just here, like from Glen Cove, it's a hard left and a fast right, and then like a double apex left, and then once you get into the W's, I mean, it's just like back cut, like back and forth on switchback after switchback.
Exactly.
So Scott, do you think of the run do you break it up into 3 sections, like when you kind of are visualizing it, or do you break it up into more sections than that?
I break it up into the 3 sections because that's kind of how, practice goes.
Sure.
So that's how your brain remembers it.
Sure. And as you're driving it, I mean, what is that the section that, like, you feel like, like you're just kind of like more relaxed in the beginning, it's more open, more flowing? Is this kind of like where the teacher springs the surprise quiz on you and you've got to really study your lines?
There's 2 left-handers. I think the first one's Ragged Edge, which has a guardrail, but it's still very intimidating. And then the second one, I think, is named Evo Corner now after Jeremy Foley went off there. And I actually chose a different line this year into Ragged Edge and set up better for that corner, and carried more speed out of it. And I think that helped us as well. Evo corner is one you just kind of tiptoe through and
Right.
and
How
you
how
know.
conservative do you think like? Do you have to leave something on the table in this middle sector just because, one, it's so tight, but for two, this is where you're really kind of that you see as a big drop off on either side of you for a lot of it.
You try not to look that direction, but certainly it can be intimidating. So I'm sure there's a hesitation there in terms of how aggressive you're going to be.
Sure.
It's always got to be in the back of your head,
Yeah.
like no matter what.
Well, and then when you've run the race in the past and you get out of this section and you get up to Devils, is that the point where you kind of like do a sigh of relief and you can kind of like just let the car run again?
Yeah, as you accelerate through Devils, you kind of take a big breath and get ready to. And I really enjoy the top section. It's got a little bit of everything.
Sure.
Some quick sweepers and straightaways and some technical as well through Boulder Park. And of course, the frost heaves at the top are always interesting.
Yeah.
They were pretty big this year.
For sure. Sure.
Yeah, and you've always accelerated on that top section. Always like picked up times from other drivers in that top section. Just
right.
Yeah,
it's got to come from the rally background a little bit. Just knowing that it's rough. you
Right.
deal with it, and then we try and set up the car to be a little more compliant so that it gets over those frost heaves a little better. Some of those cars up there are so high strung. I mean, some of those guys, like the
kid in the S2000.
The S2000, when they first showed up for practice, I mean, they were running extremely stiff springs. And, I mean, they just weren't prepared for exactly how rough it could be. And they ended up, I think, dropping the spring rates nearly in half.
Yeah.
Wow.
For the rest of practice and race day.
This is Brett Dickey. Was the driver. Yeah. Well, and maybe through race week, you said, Scott, that the car was very reliable. So I mean, I'm sure that probably bolstered some confidence. So you just knew you could just get in the car and drive. That had to help.
Oh yeah. I kept saying the car gets better and I get slower, but
Well, the times don't bear that out. You were getting faster too.
no, I was happy.
I mean,
a little disappointing on qualifying day that we got rain.
Well, that was weather is kind of the story of this year, and for us for qualifying, that's where it really started to kind of become part of the narrative, for sure.
Yeah, and qualifying day, you were just really starting to get comfortable with a lot of those tighter hairpins, taking them in second, carrying more speed, and like qualifying day would have been the perfect time to lose a bunch of seconds in that section, and then it was just rain.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So for the people,
we get 3 runs in, and I think my third run, which was my quickest, I really started to feel more comfortable with the rain tires.
Right, and then of course it started drying up.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Right when we were leaving, it was blue skies and sunny.
Yeah.
So,
were you guys on Continentals or Hoosiers? What kind of rain tires were you guys on?
Continental Range.
Nice.
Yeah. So for people that aren't familiar, so we should explain. I'll try and do this quickly. So the whole group of cars is broken up into 3 groups, and they break the mountain up into those 3 sections: bottom, middle, and top. And whenever your run group is in the bottom sector, that's when you qualify. So your qualifying time is your best time in the bottom sector only. But in those 3 days of running the mountain on race week, you're only on each section 1 time. So you only have 1 day that you're on the bottom to qualify. So we were on the 3rd day, which would be Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
So Tuesday and Wednesday, those groups had dry and good conditions for qualifying, and our group on Thursday had rain all the time that we were on the mountain. Because it's the other thing too worth mentioning is this is testing in the morning, so like from basically sun up to about 8:30 is the only time that you can test on the mountain. And as soon as the road basically opens to the public, that's when all the race cars have to shut everything down and come off the mountain. So you're really limited for time, and you only basically get one little chunk of time to qualify. And for ours, we just kind of got a little disadvantage.
Yeah, and we ran out of time. Derek Boyd spun on one of his runs, so that probably ate up an hour worth of time that we could have used for extra runs.
Which and that video was kind of terrifying. I mean, he was doing like 140 or something, just ridiculous, and just went to downshift, and the ass end of the car just came out, and he was sideways for a couple hundred yards.
Wow.
which is kind of crazy.
He was coming into Gillies Corner, which the straight before that is pretty fast. I mean, he was well over 100 miles an hour and downshifted, and it just broke loose on him.
It just goes to show. I mean, even in practice, you never know.
Yeah.
I think it's worth mentioning too. If Derek Boyd's doing about 140 through there, I don't know if you guys saw the picture of Randy Pope's car.
Whose car?
Well, Randy Pope's, when they were doing qualifying in that Tesla Plaid, they were doing 130. Was the fastest they got to in qualifying and practice. That's just bonkers.
Well, Reese was 145 in the bottomless pit.
Yeah, that video is crazy also.
Jeez.
Well, but yeah, so as bad as Thursday was for us in qualifying, I mean, qualifying really sets the pace for race day. You know, the better you qualify, the sooner you can go. Hopefully the sooner you can get out of weather. But the rest of the teams that were on the middle or top section on Thursday, those guys really had it bad. I mean, I want to say a couple of those guys barely got 2 runs from Devil's Playground to the summit on Thursday, and it was just pouring rain. It was near freezing. So, I mean, at least it was somewhat warm from start line to Glen Cove on Thursday. But yeah, I mean, those other teams having to practice in that, you know, you only get a couple days in each section or a day in each section. And those guys trying to learn the top with those frost heaves and pouring rain, I mean, that just seemed terrifying.
Yeah. Well, and Scott, so let's talk about the frost heaves. So this is something that occurs in that top section of the mountain, basically from Devil's Playground to the summit. And it comes from water getting under the road and freezing overnight, which kind of raises up the asphalt, and then it melts, and then it refreezes and just melts and refreezes, and it stresses the asphalt so that kind of you get these peaks. How different was it this year compared to previous years? Was it something that it really stood out to you, or was it not that much different?
Not a huge difference. The first frost heave which was a new one last year, is in at the entry to the corner at Bottomless Pit, right before the apex. That's kind of one you have to be careful with.
Yeah.
Randy Popes learned that lesson last year when he went off there.
Right.
And then you've got quite a distance until the real frost heaves start, which is in Boulder Park on a right-hander, and then you kind of make your way towards Cogg's Cut, which is the second to last corner, and that's where people get in trouble. You've got frost heaves before that corner, and it's difficult to get the car to slow down when it's bouncing around.
It's bouncing.
I would say that the bumps were a little bit more severe this year, not drastically, but I did notice it was a little more painful on my neck than in prior years, just from the bouncing. But the car handled it well, and you just, pick your points to be aggressive and back off when it's a little.
It sounds like you really have to factor that in when you're thinking about how you're going to drive that sector and pick your lines, is how the bumps are going to affect the car for braking and whatnot.
Right.
So it was starting to kind of come up, and then I guess at this point we might as well explain what happened on race day. So on race day, everybody is in the pits. You get up in the morning, and then I guess, Scotty, how did you first find out that something had changed?
We went and got in line to get up on the mountain at about 11:15, 11:30, and one of the guys that worked up top actually came down and talked to us. He said he got the call saying that they had just got 6 inches at the summit.
6 inches of
snow.
Snow, yeah.
Of snow. So he basically, like at 11:30, 11:45, they had already started to plow, like from the summit down. But they were also saying that there was a thick layer of ice underneath all that snow.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, that's when we heard about it. It was the prior year, there was a layer of ice from the summit down, and there was like an hour and a half delay in even getting the race started because they were up there trying to melt that ice.
Yeah, they were literally chipping it off with shovels and like I don't know.
Last year maybe it was 500 yards down from the summit. This year it was about a mile.
Yeah.
And they worked all night on it, hoping that they'd have some sun on Sunday to finish the job. But
yeah, the sun never came out until
did.
Basically till the race was over. But Yeah. So, I mean, when we got up, you know, it was basically they had the drivers meeting at 7:30, and then another drivers meeting at 8:30, and that's pretty much when they announced that we were only going to run up to 16 mile. So,
Yeah, just at the Devil's Playground, basically, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was super crazy. I mean, you talk about the weather changing constantly and it being bright and sunny, like after everything was done. If people at home are watching live feed, if you go back and watch the live feed, that camera view they have where you can see the finish and it's like the last turn to the finish.
Yeah.
Most of the time you're watching it, you're like, why is it this camera view? Why not see the other thing? One of the times the fog cleared and you could actually see the other turn and the road coming up to it. And like most of the time that was covered in fog.
Yeah.
You know, it's like that had to be pretty crazy. I don't know what it was like when you went through there, Scott, but
It was pretty foggy that last straight before the corner, before the flag. And that corner came out of the clouds on me and kind of caught me by surprise.
Yeah. Well,
it was literally changing for every competitor, it seemed like. The fog would come in, it would pull back, it would get thicker, it would pull back.
I think Paul Dollenbach, who was the fastest qualifier, I think he had fog on his run.
Yep.
So it was
Yeah.
variable for sure.
Yeah, and this is in that middle technical section that we started out talking about, where you have, you know, a lot of really tight corners one after the other. You have a lot of fall off on the road, and it's probably the section of the road where you'd most like to see where you're going.
You'd like to see where you're going. There's no trees to give any kind of.
Yeah.
I mean, when you
see the fog pull back, you can see just literally how steep it is on the road coming in, like, you know, on the turns just before the finish, like. And you see in the video too, there's like blue sky and just hillside, you know, there's just a road in front of you. I mean, it's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the weather changing that day was another thing. I mean, we had no idea that there was even wet sections on the road, you know, because
that was frustrating. They're very good at usually updating you on weather conditions. Obviously they have people on the mountain at every sector.
Yeah.
Right.
Gave me a heads up that there was any moisture on the road. And I think I hit wet road right below engineers and was like kind of an, damn.
A code brown. A code brown moment.
Now.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, so we waited up until, I mean, what was it, like 7 competitors in front of you? We were like, well, let's wait to see like what tires we're going to run. And we never heard anything about, you know, the road being wet. I mean, it was probably still the better idea to keep the slicks on for most of the road. Cause I mean, you put the reins on and then you're going to suffer on most of the dry.
Right.
And of course, Murphy's Law, if we would have put the reins on, it would have been dry for the entire run.
Yep.
So,
and it actually, it was really the middle section of that run that was wet and then it dried after Glen Cove. So,
Okay. Well, and the one job that I think I would like least to have in this world is to be an organizer for the hill climb on race day, because man, like trying to figure out how to handle the situation and trying to guess what the mountain is going to do in terms of weather. I mean, you're just such at the mercy of what happens. And I gotta say, as much of as unfortunate as it was that they shortened the course, I mean, there was really no other choice that they had.
Yeah, I think that was a pretty easy choice considering the conditions.
But the really good part of it was everybody at least got to run the same course.
Right.
So in the past, what has happened where weather is really, like severe weather has come in the middle of the race, then they're faced with this difficult choice to then shorten or move the finish line. But then you have a lot of competitors that don't get the same run as the people who went before. So shortening it and moving it down to where they did, it all worked out because then everybody at least got the same run of the mountain, which was great, because then even if you went in the last on the mountain, you still had the chance to compete with the person who went first. You're running the same course.
Right.
And Scott, I never asked you, did you ever get your chicken sandwich when you got?
I did get my chicken sandwich, yeah.
So they actually brought lunch down to you?
Brought them down. Yeah.
Nice.
That's amazing.
We were talking about that because
no donut though.
No donuts.
No donut.
That's why we race Pikes Peak.
That's right. The Summit House.
Because, you know, usually when they get to the summit, they can hang out in the summit. So if it's raining or storming or anything, they can hang out in the summit house and be covered. Well, they finished at 16 Mile just below Devil's Playground, and then there was no cover. There was no building for them to go hide in. So what
Yep.
did you guys do when you got up there?
The weather was actually not too bad. We
Okay.
just hung out.
Yeah.
People just walking around, and a lot of. I was surprised how many spectators were at Devils.
I
Yeah.
didn't even think about it until I
Parking
saw
lot.
some of the
Yeah.
pictures, but it
Yeah.
made sense that they let all the spectators up. So, I mean, Devil's Playground is one of the key places to be if you're going to spectate this race. So the whole parking lot was full of spectators, and then all of a sudden, they all had front row seats to the finish line, which is,
Right.
I guess, kind of fortunate.
Yeah,
And then-
and so I had told Ryan wanted to go up to Devils, and I'm like, look, man, I got to tell you, it's looking like it's going to rain. It's possible it might snow. If they cut the race to halfway, you're going to be stuck at Devils and not see a single car come up. And
Right.
it just turned out that they ran it to Devils, and instead it probably was the best place to actually spectate.
Yeah.
Don't say it
this
like
year.
that, Scotty. Don't
I'm
say it
sorry,
like
man. I'm sorry.
Because when they shortened it, 2 years ago on us? 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
We ran just below Glen Cove.
And it was
Yeah.
like lightning and
Yeah.
thunder up at the
Lightning
summit.
is good. Yeah.
So like the first half of everybody got to run to the top, and then
Yeah, I think I was on the start line when they came over and announced that they were
Yeah.
shortening the course.
sure enough, we
Yeah.
were next in line.
Yep. Man, well, so I mean, what was your takeaway, Scott? I mean, weather came in the middle. You had to contend with a little bit of rain or wet conditions, but I mean, we still had a pretty good run. And
Just looking at the run and how it felt, I think the lower section I was off about 3 seconds from my best time in qualifying last year, and actually my run on Sunday last year. And thinking back, I think it maybe overdrove that a little bit, just trying to be too aggressive.
well, and how much of a factor do you think the wet conditions were on race day? Like, what percentage of the track was wet?
Maybe 30%, 40%.
That's significant.
Yeah. Just starting to get wet. So felt pretty comfortable on the rain tire or on the slicks until ski area where I downshifted to second and the rear end decided to kind of kick out on me. But
Right.
Which is, after seeing some of the videos and some of the pictures of that, yeah, the true rally driver came out in that corner.
Yeah.
A lot of people really like those videos and those pictures from that corner. Evidently, the racing chica thought that was the end of
I read
everything.
her post. Yeah, end of her life. The other guy said death by race car is not a bad way to go.
Right.
Fortunately, it did not come to that. Fortunately, but it definitely was an attention grabber. Got some people to wake up that had been sitting on the mountain since first thing in the morning.
Exactly.
Well, and you gotta hope that Pikes Peak will actually take that into account next year and not have people standing on the outside of a corner.
And I'm sure
Yes.
they will. Yeah.
Because in the live stream, I think it was Donahue that was right before you, or a couple cars before you maybe, but he comes through that corner on just like a standard apex, outside, inside, outside, and he actually dipped 2 wheels in that dirt also. Your wheels were definitely a couple feet further in on the dirt, but I mean, it's just a bad place to have.
Yeah, and that barrier
spectators
would cause more damage than.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Well, but overall, Scott, I mean, were you happy with what you were like the amount that you were given on race day? Are you happy with what you were able to put down? I mean,
Yeah, I'm happy with what we did.
Yeah.
It's surprising to me, a lot of the guys that were we had a few rookies in our group from France, and they were slower in practice in all week, and they put down some good runs. A lot of people did.
Yeah.
it's one of those things. I think that there's so much of a buildup with this race because you have a whole week of practice that I think you get kind of that extra push of anticipation come race day, like just really decide to go as fast as you possibly can,
Right.
even if the conditions are less than ideal and you can't see where you're going. Well,
Yeah,
and
right.
maybe too, like so one of the competitors that you had a really good battle with all week was David Hackle. And he was driving was it an 83 Quattro?
An 84 Quattro.
84?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
beautiful car.
just and he's been up there with us most of the last was it 6 years, 8 years? Most of them.
I'd say 6 to 7 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've always been very competitive with each other.
And it
we had
sounds
a great
like
week, kind of swapping times, and
Yep.
we were always getting him by at least a second when it was all said and done. And come Sunday, he outdrove me on the lower section. We pretty much tied on the middle, and I got him on the top. But when it was said and done, he was 4/10 seconds faster than me.
4
just
tenths.
barely.
Yeah, 4/10.
Yeah.
And
Had
it
like
was
almost 8 minutes.
it was pretty funny because Troy and the rest of Hackle's crew were standing down there watching timing with us, and we saw your time come through. And as soon as Dave Hackle's time came through, Troy was standing right there. He's like, "You see this? 4 tenths." And so, I mean, the rivalry between you drivers is awesome, but also like the bickering that our crew and their crew had all week was really funny.
Yeah.
Just trying to light fires under each other's drivers' asses, like, "Oh, they got you. And I think at one point I was going to tell you that Dave beat you, even though he didn't, just so you would try and go out and go faster.
Well, yeah, in the top section in practice, you came over and said, "Scott, you're way off pace. You're way off pace." And my final run time hadn't been posted yet, and all of a sudden the Hackle's crew looks over and yells some obscenities to us like, jerks. It turns out my final run was a second faster than Dave. So
Yeah.
Well, that's got to be part of the fun, Scott. As you're going through race weeks, is to find these cars that are in your class that you're paced close with, and just kind of like you've got a whole week now to kind of see how you stack up.
Right. Yeah, and it's unique because there's such a diversity of cars, and in Time Attack 1, you've got crazy stuff, and then you've got us little guys, and it's fun to have somebody to battle with, for sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I mean, it wouldn't be that fun if you were getting blown away by 5 to 10 seconds on every single section.
Right.
But, the fact that there are guys that are right there with you and you guys are pushing each other, to make yourselves better drivers and just drop that time for race day.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's fun.
Just out of curiosity, I mean, do you think there was any advantage on race day to having an all-wheel drive car versus the guys that were rear-wheel drive? Or do you think that just whether it was not as much of a factor?
It didn't come through in my times, but
yeah,
certainly helped me on that little off I had, for sure.
on the slide.
Yeah.
Yeah. The rally routes of the car and the driver, that was a good environment for them.
But you look at the qualifying times, like Robin Shute in his open wheel, very impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was within 3.5 seconds of Vaschholz.
Yeah,
and
he qualified in dry conditions.
In dry conditions, and Shute was in the rain, and evidently Shute wanted it to rain harder.
He loves the rain, I guess.
Yeah,
Wow.
and it shows. I mean,
It was like, I wanted to run in the heavy rain, but I didn't want to get wet because he's an open cockpit car, so he waited a little bit.
Yeah.
And then Ron Dumas was super quick as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those guys can definitely drive.
Yeah.
Well, and Robin Shute, I mean, that was like there was some standouts still from this year's run, and his car his run was definitely one of them.
Yeah, 33 seconds quicker than second place.
Yeah, like almost 40 seconds faster than the second fastest car.
That's crazy.
And from watching the live feed, I want to say that he was probably one of the only first competitors that I don't believe fog was a factor for him, because there was a really heavy fog for that first, I don't know, 5 or maybe 10 cars that was extremely thick. Like the cameras, like you couldn't see the road, and then it kind of cleared up for an instant, and that's when Schutz was able to run through, and then it kind of came back in a little bit. So I think visibility was a part of that, but the time that he put down of, I think it was 5 minutes and 55 seconds.
Yeah.
When you figure that that's all the way up to basically Devils in just under 6 minutes, is crazy.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
it makes us just like, man, what would it have been? What would it have been if it was dry? And I guess his best top qualifying or top time in testing was 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So he was right
something
on pace.
around there.
Yeah, right on pace.
He's going to be in the 8s.
Yeah, high 8s, if not. I mean,
mid 8s, which is crazy fast. So that's like it was still an amazing run, but it's like what could have been on a better day with slightly better conditions to be able to go to the summit. But I think I would wager, Scott, that all of the drivers that are up there, and once you get up to Devils and are waiting to come back down, everybody was talking about coming back next year, I bet.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
with the 100th anniversary, and sounds like it's going to be well.
Oh yeah.
And
But did I read correctly that they're trying to have 100 competitors also?
I hadn't read that, but I know there was talk about trying to get a bunch of legends to come back.
Okay.
What's his name from Japan?
Oh, Tajima?
Yeah.
Maybe Rod Millen.
Okay. That would
Wow.
be that's going to be
Jeff
something
Swart
to see.
is planning on it.
Okay.
So.
Well, and we've got to hope for good
next year's
weather.
going to be pretty fun.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, what do you think, Scott? Are you ready to come back next year?
Yeah, I already miss it.
Yeah.
Now that you actually recovered from race week.
Yeah, give me another 2 good nights sleep and I'll be recovered.
It's amazing the toll that takes on you. And like I was talking with Scott a little bit last night, like just, you get up at 2:30, 2:45, 3 o'clock-ish. You're trying to be on the mountain by 3:15, 3:30
in the morning.
In the morning for like 4 straight days. Luckily our car was reliable. We didn't have to come back after that and work on the car the whole time. But still, it's so draining on just the crew. But then for the driver, you have to take into account like the mental strain of actually focusing on not falling off a damn mountain, the whole time you're driving. So I was beat. I think I slept 28 hours in roughly 2 days. And I wasn't even driving. So
I got to figure out Saturday night because this year didn't work for me with the meeting you guys there at 11:30 and getting up the pits at 2:30 and trying to sleep in the back of my Outback.
Oh man,
didn't work too well.
It is. I mean, it's something that you don't even run into until you actually try and compete in the race. I mean, it's not something that you'd think of or maybe talk about as much. But yeah, just from a crew standpoint for sure, but even from a driver standpoint, I mean, it's like, what do you have to do to get enough rest to be able to get mentally sharp,
right? So
that like once the green flag drops, that you can actually put in the run that you want to put in. It's kind of a similar challenge to like the guys that are doing like a 24-hour endurance race where you're going to be in and out of the car every 4 hours for 24 hours. I mean, how do you learn to deal with that?
But those guys probably got to sleep a full 8 hours before they started that. That's one of the things a lot of people don't understand. It's not like you could get a full 8 hours of sleep in a nice comfortable bed and just roll up to Pikes Peak and start racing. It's like a lot of those guys will either camp out overnight or get there super early like we did and sleep in their car or their trailer. I
remember
tents.
And then when the Globe came and they had all of those RVs.
And then the bears.
Yeah. Yeah. So explain that, Scotty. What are you talking about?
So when we rolled up to the pits at 1:30 in the morning, Bryant and his crew pulled up like probably 40 feet away from where our trailer was parked. And they were supposed to come help me rearrange some cars. I'm like, where the hell are these guys? And I walk over there and I knock on the window and he just says bears. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he shined the flashlight out his driver's side window and there was a mama bear and 2 cubs on the tree about 6 feet away from his truck. And those bears ended up getting caught in that tree for the remainder of the day. I mean, they basically stole the show down in the pits. Like, people were walking around looking at cars for a while and they were standing there looking at this mama bear and her 2 cubs, for the remainder of the day. And that was crazy, I mean, we had walked right by there.
Yeah.
And a bunch of people had. I mean, there was probably 40, 50 cars that showed up right there at 1:30, 1:45, and there was a bear. I mean, it could have turned out way worse.
So. Sure. Yeah, especially because it's a mama with her cubs, but fortunately it did not.
Oh, they seem like they're having a gay old time. Just playing around in there and just chomping on like branches and such. They didn't seem to be bothered at all.
Yeah. That's, I guess, when they said Pikes Peak was going to be open to spectators, I guess they did not clarify. I mean, you got turkeys and marmots and bears and people. Yeah, just everybody.
Yeah, maybe they identify as spectators.
Well, they definitely were on that day.
A good vantage point.
Yeah.
Scott, did anybody hit marmots this year?
I didn't hear of any actual marmot victims.
Good. Because you were saying
this one in practice.
You were on practice day. Was that Wednesday when we were up top? You said you saw 2 of them on the road.
2 or 3, yeah.
Damn.
They're not the smartest rodents.
And they're not the smallest rodents either.
No, they're huge.
I mean, these things will do some damage to the car, if not fling the car off the mountain.
Yeah, it becomes obvious that this is a national park, 364 days, the other days of the year. And it was behaving as such this year, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what were there any other standouts as far as cars or competitors or things that you guys saw through the course of race week that just really kind of, just jumped out at you for this year?
I mean, we got to talk a little bit about the Bentley, right? The one that we talked about with Ollie.
Yep.
I mean, that thing, you looked at their qualifying times for the 2 sectors, like Sector 1 and Sector 2, and they were just blowing Dumas out of the water. And then they barely limped it across the 3rd sector across the finish line. And I went and talked to those guys because they were storing their car here at PPIR. Mm-hmm. And they were telling us, it not going to the top was a blessing. I'm like, oh, yeah. It's like, well, we ended up, having what we thought was a big mechanical, but they ended up blowing up their intake manifold. And it's just carbon fiber and stuff, and so they limped it across the finish line, with hardly any power. And it would have been really cool to see, he had 8 or 9 seconds in the first 2 sectors on Dumas. I mean, his sector times were just wild, dumb fast. So it would have been pretty interesting to see how it would have turned out.
Yeah. And it was some kind of so this is Reese Mellon driving the faster
Mm-hmm.
Bentley, and he said something. It was like a backfire that went into the intake manifold somehow that caused the failure.
Yeah.
And he put up an in card. You can actually see him raise his hands up, because just no power. Like he's coming out of a corner.
Yeah. He's
downshifting, and there's just nothing. And he raises his hands at the moment. Like you can see that something's definitely changed. So yeah, they probably would have DNF'd if it weren't for the fact that it was a short course.
Right. And that's what they're saying. It was kind of a blessing in disguise because, they got their 2 sector times out there in the world. And, just even if you look at it, their times, so Paul Dellenbach, in his fancy car, they were 7 or 6 seconds faster in the first sector than Dellenbach and 4 seconds faster. Actually 5 seconds faster than Dellenbach in the second sector. So, they were definitely contending to be the second fastest overall car for sure.
Yeah, they had the package to win the class for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But just they had. There's weather and in other issues. But that car was impressive. Robin Chute's car was very, very impressive.
Yeah.
Impressive to me was William I. Young in that Civic.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Holland was there to break the front wheel drive record in his Audi, but he was matched by.
Oh yeah.
Sure.
He was outmatched by Will.
Yes.
I think I heard somebody this last week call it a wing with a Civic attached to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The amount of downforce is insane.
Well, and
his total
Scotty,
time was a 7:09. So to put it in comparison, that was pretty fast. But even Randy Pope's under whatever unplugged performance car, it ran a 657. So he wasn't that far off of 1,000 horsepower electric vehicle with Randy Pope's driving it,
Yeah. Well, and Scotty, you and Dustic should explain, maybe just give a quick background for who Will A. Young is and the story behind that Civic, because he's done some really impressive things, and this is just his second year on the mountain.
Mm-hmm. So Will A. Young is a big-time time attack driver from Canada. He's set the front-wheel drive record of Tsukuba. He's done it on their tires that they require you to run over there, and then he brought Hoosiers with him and went even faster with the Hoosiers. He's been to World Time Attack several times. I can't remember how well he's done there, but I know he's done pretty well. Obviously, he's got a ton of records all over North America in that car. And I think it's a fresh build car. But the last car he had, I think it was at Road America. Does that sound right, Scotty, when he hit the wall with it?
Yeah.
He hit the wall so hard at Road America that when he bounced off, I think he had like an oil cooler or something rupture, and when he went and jumped on the brakes, the right front tire just was an oil slick, so it just pulled the car to the left. He hit the wall so hard that when he came off the wall going the opposite direction, he was doing 140 miles an hour when he bounced off the wall. So, I mean, it was some massive G-forces in that car that when it happened. So, and I think that was just in 2019 when that happened. And then they couldn't do any traveling or anything for COVID anyway. So he owns like a small shop up in Canada. Yeah, and I think they do like mostly stereo installs too. And he and his team out of that shop have built that car from scratch. And it's insane. I mean, the tunnel, like the transmission, it's not obviously a transmission tunnel, but like the rear tunnel in the back of the car, like me and Scotty could lay in that thing, like hunched over, you were in it. Like,
it's
insane.
You could use it as a tent if you needed to.
Yeah.
But it's still what kind of blows me away is the amount of people that I heard up there this year, like, why the hell is there a front wheel drive car trying to compete in this? And people still don't understand that front wheel drive cars built correctly are breaking records. And when we mean breaking records, and Dusik said a lot of lap records, and we don't mean front wheel drive lap records only, but like overall lap records, and I mean, that kind of stuff is, people still just don't get it. You can build a really fast front wheel drive car.
Yeah. He has figured out that formula, and it's cool to see him try and take that formula and apply it to Pikes Peak. I mean, the front wheel drive record is one that's a little bit attainable. And so I'm sure that's part of it, but it's just it's the challenge of the environment too. I'm sure that he's just I'm sure he's going to come back next year and try again. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Ron Holland comes back too. Yeah. That'd be a good rivalry.
It's going to be real interesting when we beat both of them, right, Scott?
That's right. That's right. Let's see. Well, and I guess like the Tesla's time that Randy Post was driving was pretty impressive. Just thinking about like other than the IDR, other electric cars that have run up Pikes Peak. I mean, he probably was on pace to be competitive with any of those other front-running cars. Yeah. Front-running electric cars in basically a slightly modified production vehicle, which is kind of crazy. I definitely think they need to put electric cars in their own class, like 100%, for Pikes Peak, because it just seems like without having an engine in the car, that's just cheating. That's just me.
I mean, they're not affected by the altitude, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's the perfect powertrain for that environment, but it's a heck of an advantage if you can make it work.
And so one of the other things I wanted to bring up was the fact that we had a lot of local rookies that were up at the mountain this year. And 3 of them actually participate in the NASA Rocky Mountain region with me and Ryan. Time attack drivers, some of them actually race wheel to wheel. And all 3 of them failed to make it to the top this year. So it was kind of a bummer. Ben Council ended up playing some Dukes of Hazzard off engineers. And George Hess rolled the Porsche up on practice on, was that Thursday? I think is when he.
Yeah. It was on Friday. Yeah. I think it was on Friday.
It was Friday.
Yeah. Okay. Friday when it was dry. And then Adam Smith broke his drive shaft right at launch. And he actually posted that little video up last night, just so uneventful. Like they wave the green flag, he revs the car up, starts going, and there goes the drive shaft. And just a paperweight at start line.
Mhm.
That was heartbreaking too, because the race had been stopped, and it was on the restart. He was the
Yeah.
first car to go, and then had the
Yeah.
drive shaft failure.
Yeah, so I mean, it's for a lot of people, it was a really damn good race, and for
Yep.
a few other people, especially like local drivers.
The other one that I think we should mention, he was on here with us when we did our roundtables, Andy Kingsley. Andy,
Yeah.
it was very clear that he has done a lot of work to that car, his 996 Porsche, over the off season, and he was very quick through the week.
Yeah.
And just he got caught by the conditions a little bit, still put down a good time. And man, I can only imagine
Mhm.
what, with better conditions, what he's going to be able to do with that car.
But what he knocked off, I think 9 seconds off his last year's qualifying time. Is that
Yeah.
right, Scott?
So yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the split sectors, he must have got some bad weather or something in sector 2, probably with the wetness that you had to deal with, because the car that he was just behind, he was probably with the other sectors that 7-second difference ahead of them in the other 2 sectors, and just lost all that time in that middle sector.
Yeah.
I mean, that's rough. Rough go for sure.
When weather comes in, I mean, you can only do what you can
Yeah.
do.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's just such the nature of this race is like if everything doesn't line up inch perfect for your run, like, well, I got to come back next year, and maybe I can, spin that wheel of weather and make peace with the mountain, and maybe get that like 10-minute window where just everything can fall into place, and if not next year, maybe the
and
year
so
after.
like Faster Pastor, this was his 4th year up here, his 4th attempt at it, and it was his 4th year being a rookie. So if you don't make it to the top of the race, you don't make it to the top,
to the checker,
you were a rookie the next year.
Wow.
So like your car breaks down, or whatever happens, if you don't make it to the checker flag, you were a rookie the next year. So he finally made it. He's no longer a rookie after 4 years.
Man.
So it's definitely the craziest race out there as far as I'm concerned.
That's nuts. Yeah, to be able to run a race 4 times and still be a rookie, or 3 times.
That's expensive.
Yeah.
That is an expensive.
Yeah.
Yes. Man. Well, and I guess just the last person that I think we should mention is the fact that Brett Dickey came over here to run this year. I mean, that's a big deal, and that's a cool thing. And maybe Ryan, you and Scotty know more, so maybe explain why that was a big deal.
Go ahead,
Ryan. He's a world time attack driver and runs the elusive Integra over in Club Sprints over there.
In Australia, by the way, for people who don't know.
Yeah. World Time Attack Australia, the largest time attack event in the world, really.
Yeah.
Obviously, the World Time Attack. I mean, but in 2019, when I went over and spectated, they took 2nd place in Club Sprint, and that's like probably 25 cars deep. I mean, it's pretty intense class over there. And then he flew out, and they brought the car out and everything, put a sequential in it, and ran a super lap battle, blew the transmission on the first day, and then ended up putting a stock 5-speed RSX transmission in it. And it ended up being Kit Lee's transmission from one of his personal cars. And they kind of end up making like a little bit of a friendship. Kit Lee owns Project Imports in California, and they put together basically a car that tried to compete at Super Lap Battle in its opening year with Carla Pestanek, that ended up having failures. They rebuilt the whole car from scratch, recaged it, everything on it. Every panel was touched on it. And Brett Dickey was over here, and he worked on the car the entire time in California, and they built this thing up. And they're trying to take on a lot of these records. But for them, they were just trying to get to the top of the mountain. And he drove off on practice, during practice, that practice weekend or whatever, on the top section. And they pulled the car out of the boulders. They yanked a whole bunch of stuff off the front end and then sent it back up with him in it. And he just really bit the bullet and tried to get that another look, And they drove that car back. They trailered that car back to California, brought it back like 5 days later, all rebuilt, all fixed. And they had pretty like a flawless weekend. And so it's super cool to see them. They're associated with Super Lap Battle, so I hope that gets more attention for what we're trying to do with time attack. But it was cool that a driver from Australia who does time attack and he does wheel-to-wheel racing and stuff out there too was over here on our mountain, which we take for granted for because it's in our backyard.
Yeah.
Participating and competing in the event too.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, he was. The whole crew was just ecstatic being up here. They were like, "This is insane." Yeah. So yeah, for him being a rookie, and he definitely learned some things the hard way. But at the end of the race, he was super excited, and I think he wants to come back and do it again. So
let's hope. It's really cool to see Will Young and Brett Dickey, Project Import, and like Life Motorsports and Cole Powelson. They've come up in the past. There's really starting to be more of some of the cars that are like the ultimate like open time attack cars that are starting to like. Pikes Peak is really starting to get into their view. They want to come up here and test this environment as well as just doing the time attack stuff on the other courses.
It puts the international on Pikes Peak International Hill Climb, right?
Yep.
The
Absolutely.
Drivers from France, drivers from Australia and New Zealand. I think John McGuinness was from New Zealand, right, or something like that, running one of the drivers from all over the country. Yeah, one of the Sierra cars. Yeah.
There's rumors that he's actually building a Pro Drive replica Impreza for next year.
Oh,
interesting.
GC8.
Well, it's a good thing you
awesome.
brought the Pallades flag because you're the only actual full-blown Subaru that raced this year, right? There was a couple Subaru powered things, but you were the only Subaru up there this year, Scott?
I think last year as well, right?
That's crazy to me.
What was very cool is Jeff Zwart posted up this picture of Porsches on the mountain, and Scott, you had just snuck right in there, and you might have got in there because it says "Proud of Boxer" on the wing, and it's a Boxer, and it's a Porsche, just snuck in there.
Several people thought that was my dog.
Oh, really?
Oh. Man.
Obviously not car people.
That's right. That's right. Definitely not Subaru people.
Yeah.
Man. Well, all in all, it was a crazy race week. A lot of real positives to take from it, and then just like the race day was what it was. But everybody got a run, and that's I think the most important part, especially given the weather that came in. And really, at this point, it's 360 days to the next one. Something like that.
Oh, right about there.
The clock is ticking.
All right. Well, so we have to find a way to get nitrous into the jet turbine engine in time. So we're going to get right on that. Yes.
Well, I think the next big venue to pay homage. I would love that Super Lap Battle was there. I think it's time we bring some Hill Climbs car to Super Lap Battle. What do you think, Scott?
Yeah. We're talking about it.
We're just talking about it.
That track, dude, is so much fun and it's so wide open, and like just the environment is just it's similar. It's just so intoxicating, and they're everything about their or they call it their video their live stream. It's super on point. They've really got it dialed in. I think it'll be a lot of fun.
We're talking about Super Lap Battle at COTA is what we're talking about here.
Yep. Well, in February next year.
And for us, the real exciting part for us coming out of this race week is that it feels like we have kind of finally turned the corner on the car where it is finally doing the things that we want it to do. I shouldn't even say this out loud, but it's finally working the way that we want it to work in the conditions. So the cooling finally did what we needed it to do. We got the dry sump sorted out. Oiling is working well. It's part of the cooling system. Power is better than it's ever been. So I think that's kind of what we've talked about is like we feel like we now really have a really good solid package, and rather than kind of trying to throw everything out and reinvent the wheel, now it's just kind of let's refine, make some small revisions rather than some big revisions, because it feels like we finally have gotten things to work the way that we want it to do after a long number of years of testing.
Yeah.
So once you've got it all figured out, now it's just, well, where do you point the race car, which event? So that's a much better place to be in.
Scott, we're not going to let this go. I'm actually gonna go send you an email with the actual dates, so you can just mark those off, and we'll drive the car out, get it all set up. All you got to do is fly into Austin,
pick you up,
drive over, or just arrive and drive.
Yeah, I mean the airport is literally only like, was it 20 minutes from the track?
20 minutes,
if it's even that far.
No, I've been there.
Yeah. This is something that we've been this has been mentioned to Scott multiple times in the background for those of you at home. But yeah, that looks like a really fun event, and now I think it's we don't really have as much work to do to the car. Again, I shouldn't say that out loud, but
stop.
This is the internet. Nobody's going to see.
How many times have I told you to stop saying these things?
Well, it's an accomplishment, man. We have to take take some time to realize like there's been a ton of work to get to this point, and finally now we can make use of the car the way we want it to.
Yeah.
Which is it's a really good feeling coming out of this race week in this year's running.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, perfect. Well, that is as high a note I think as we could end on. So I don't know. Any of you guys have anything you wanted to mention real quick as we're wrapping it up?
Nope.
July is going to be the month of fun. I mean, we've got SCCA time trials this week, NASA time trials of Pueblo next week, SCCA time trials of Pueblo the week after that. Then it's Alpine Horizon Fest, and then it's potentially Utah. Like, it is just going to be the next 5 weekends is going to be absolutely bananas.
Yeah, Scotty and I were just looking at his schedule for the next, month and a half, 2 months.
Yeah, well, it's through the beginning of September, because I mean, it's basically you, Ryan, you have something going on damn near every week, but just the NASA event between now and the end of August or something like every 2 to 3 weeks with a lot of travel. I mean, you got Utah, you got Nebraska.
Hastings.
Yeah, all of a sudden, like the pace of Pikes Peak, where it's once a year, all of a sudden there's a pull to that. It's a little bit more breathing room, but it's going to be a lot of fun. There's a lot of exciting racing to be done, and so I'm sure we'll try and talk about as much as we can. So stay tuned for those of you at home listening. So, well, and just real quick too, should send a big thanks out to everybody that crewed for the car for us for the week. So Boosted Scoops Motorsports, Bryant and Tegan, JD. Matt, those guys, Scotty,
Thank you.
did an amazing job. Just really pleased with the way things turned out. 360 days to do it, and we'll try and keep track of all the racing between now and then. But back to the grind, as it were.
Back to work.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much for listening. Thanks for sticking with us to the end. Really appreciate it all. And until next time, stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning. All right, see you guys. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Scott.